Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michelle Jolin, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Results for America. Thanks for joining us today to discuss the opportunities for cities and towns to leverage the tax benefits of the elective pay provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, to advance the clean energy projects. This is a different mechanism than those we've talked about in prior LIH sessions. Rather than competitive grants, these are tax benefits. So it's a really important session to help cities take advantage of this opportunity. So I'm going to pass it over to Antha Williams, who leads the environmental program at Bloomberg Philanthropies, who's going to introduce our first speaker. Antha?
Thank you so much, Michelle, for that great introduction for today's session. My name's Antha Williams, and I lead the environmental programs at Bloomberg Philanthropies, which includes our work to protect oceans, transition to clean power away from fossil fuels, and of course, empower mayors to take action. And through our work with organizations like Climate Mayors, C40, and the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, we love working with you to share best practices, implement solutions, and spend federal dollars to reduce climate pollution. Here at Bloomberg, we know that national governments can't act alone in addressing the multifaceted and very urgent problem of climate change. And we know that it's really critical for cities and national governments to work together. Direct pay, which we're talking about today, is one of the most exciting new ways that the federal government is empowering local governments and individuals to reduce emissions and pay for clean energy solutions. I think this week, the urgency of the climate issues needs no special introduction, but the heat waves, the floods, and the deaths from these severe weather events made worse by climate make the problem as urgent as it's ever been. And so with that said, I want to turn it over to someone who deserves a lot of the credit for direct pay and the nation's climate ambition overall. He's been a really strong advocate for US cities, states, and businesses on climate, and a really close partner to us at Bloomberg Philanthropies, John Podesta. Thanks to John and the Biden administration, we're now implementing the first ever major climate bill, the Inflation Reduction Act. And this has the potential to move us from the 22% reduction in emissions that we've already achieved to a 50% reduction in just the next 7 years. Thanks so much for your leadership today, John, and for taking the time to be with us. With that, over to you, John Podesta.
Well, thank you, Antha, and thanks, Michelle, and thanks to Bloomberg Philanthropies. I've done this group a few times before. It's always one of my favorites to do because you're the leaders who make this happen. The mayors, the city staff, the leadership you have shown. Really, a lot of what the Inflation Reduction Act became was really modeled by efforts that you pioneered in cities. And as Antha noted, it puts us on track. The act alone will cut our emissions by 40% over the next 7 years, but together in partnership with you all and using the tools that we have in the federal government, we're confident that we can hit that 50 to 52% cut in emissions on 2005 baseline by 2030. We've been hard at work trying to implement the bill, and I think you've been experiencing the programs that have come out, particularly on the grant side, from urban forestry to pollution reduction grants to the lending programs. Vice President just announced the open competition for the greenhouse gas reduction funds just last Friday. But I think the lion's share of the work that is being done to reduce emissions in the IRA is coming on the tax side. I'm glad to be joined by my colleague, Laurel Blatchford from the Department of Treasury, who'll get into this in a little bit more depth. But generally, the tax support for clean energy, for clean manufacturing, for clean buildings, for clean agriculture and forestry have been available to the private sector and have pretty much left out public entities. That changed in this bill through the vehicle that Antha mentioned, which is called direct, we call it direct pay. The Treasury Department calls it elective pay. It's the same thing. But in essence, it gives the ability of cities, states, territories, tribes, and importantly, nonprofits to be able to take advantage of a number of the important tax credits on clean power, clean transportation, et cetera. It comes in the form of being able to develop those projects and then get in essence, a check in lieu of that tax ban back from the federal government in the form of a check from the Treasury Department. So whether you're a school district, a water district, the city itself, the economic development agency, a public university, a large nonprofit hospital, community-based group that wants to do community solar, if you want to electrify your vehicle fleet or retrofit your buildings, this is a feature of the law that I think offers enormous opportunity, both for you directly to take advantage of. And one of the things I would ask you to do is to work with us to inform the other nonprofit entities, particularly in your city and the sub-city entities, to be able to plan a sustainable pathway and take advantage of this really, really critical feature of the law. And we have issued, as I said, that preliminary guidance. So the outlines and the availability of being able to plan projects and take advantage of direct pay is already available. But I'm going to let Laurel dive a little bit more into the details and then come back for questions. But I think this is, if we can partner together and you can partner with the other nonprofits in your city, we can make a lot happen in this regard.
John, thanks so much. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Laurel Blatchford, who is the U.S. Department of Treasury's Chief Implementation Officer for IRA. She's going to talk about the Treasury Department's recent guidance on these tax benefits. And then, as John said, after Laurel's done, both John and Laurel will be available for questions. So Laurel.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And thank you, John. It's so good to see both of you. It is also, local government is near and dear to me. I got my start working for Mayor Bloomberg way back when in his first and second term, and just love speaking to a group like this. And as John said, I think this is really where the rubber is going to hit the road on this body of work. So thank you so much for inviting me to talk more about the Inflation Reduction Act and specifically elective pay. As John said, we call it elective pay. It's the same thing as direct pay. Working in tandem with our Office of Tax Policy, our program office that I lead was stood up to provide ongoing support, coordination, and capacity building to make sure IRA funds are spent equitably and effectively. So this is exactly part of what we want to do here today. The work Bloomberg and all of the partners on the local infrastructure hub are doing to ensure cities and towns have access to the resources and expert advice needed to access federal funding is so important, and really glad to be a part of it. So let me jump in because we are talking about taxes and tax policy, and because we are in the stage of guidance where we are putting out preliminary guidance and getting feedback, I want to just give you some important disclaimers. The content of this remarks today and the examples and other things I'll share are going to be based on proposed and temporary regulations and other tax guidance. You can find this on irs.gov. We'll share links here and later as well. Just know that I'll be simplifying, generalizing to convey the point. This is not tax guidance that I'm giving you. Please refer to the guidance issued by the IRS for detailed information. Next slide, please. I just want to make sure we're saying this in a couple of different ways, but really to reiterate, we are in a public comment period. The public comment period is 60 days long. Right now, that means we'll be closing on August 14th. We open it on June 14th. We request your comments. We are eager for your comments. Please submit them in writing. You can visit regulations.gov to file and view those comments. We are not going to give today, I'm not going to be able to give anything beyond what is in the proposed and temporary rules themselves in terms of my feedback and Q&A. And I can't comment on opinions, interpretations, specific taxpayer-related questions. But please know that we are going to be carefully considering all of the public feedback we receive before decisions are made on the substance of the final rules. So let's dive in. If you can go to the next slide. So John started to explain this, and I just want to give a little more context and color to this. The Inflation Reduction Act allows certain applicable entities, such as state, local, and tribal governments, tax exempt organizations. These are basically going to be receiving tax incentives as direct payments for the first time. This is, a very important step to all of the things we're hoping to achieve in this bill. But unlike competitive grant and loan programs, these elective pay allows entities to get their payment if they meet the requirements for both elective pay and the underlying tax credit. I apologize. I think we have jumped ahead a few slides. Would it be possible to go back, or is this where we are? Okay, we'll just keep going. Let's go back to the slide we were on. So I think a couple of things I would underscore here. One, the applicants are not going to get this award and like in the competitive grant and loan programs, but basically if you meet the requirements, this is part of why we're so eager to share what's happening and how it works here with all of you. By filing a return and using elective pay, these entities, which we'll talk more about in a minute, can receive tax-free cash payments from the IRS. So as long as all the requirements are met, including a really important pre-registration filing requirement, which we'll talk about in a minute, that will mean that we can, that you will be eligible for elective pay. And the other thing I would call your attention to is elective pay is what I would consider a boost or a cross-cutting provision. It is applicable to 12 of the Inflation Reduction Act's tax credits. Next slide, please. So this is a quick summary. And again, I know we're going to be sending all of this out, so please don't worry about copying all of this down. But this is a list of the applicable tax credits for elective pay. You can see here that they apply to the energy generation and carbon capture tax credits. Next slide, please. Also to the manufacturing vehicles and fuels credits. There are some slight differences in all of this. This is actually quite important information. Again, I don't want to take time today walking through each of the details, but we will circulate this with you for sure. Next slide. And then the last thing I want to call your attention to is that certain requirements and bonuses affect the amount of elective pay that is applicable in each of the tax credits. So again, part of the, I think, amazing thing about the Inflation Reduction Act is that you have a number of these other tax credits that are also applicable, prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. This will be guidance we expect will be coming out in the coming months here. This will increase the credit amount by 5 times as per the law for projects that meet requirements for paying prevailing wages. There's also a domestic content bonus, an energy communities bonus, and then a low-income communities bonus credit program. So as you can see, this is quite complex. Call your attention to the prior 2 slides and then these, and sort of understanding how you're eligible will require working through the pieces of each of these credits and the requirements. Next slide. So just to try to make this a little more straightforward, how do you think about claiming and receiving an elective payment? So first, thinking as a local leader, a mayor, county exec, governor, identifying and pursuing the qualifying project or activity is your first step. So I've just thrown at you a bunch of different qualifying activities. You will, I'm sure, have projects in your pipelines that you're already thinking about for each of those credits. But that is the first step to understand where and how you might be qualifying for elective pay. Second, you would complete your project and place it into service, determining your tax year if you don't already know it, to determine when your tax return will be due. Then you file your tax return by the due date or the extended due date, and you will make a valid elective pay election, and then you receive your payment. Just to give you an example here. So a local government makes a clean energy investment that qualifies for the ITC and can file an annual tax return. This is via Form 990T with the IRS to claim elective pay for the full value of the tax credit. And then as long as it meets all of the requirements, including that pre-filing registration requirement, you'll be able to claim elective pay. So this is a little bit of an example timeline here, right? The project goes into service sometime this year. You complete the pre-filing registration with the IRS. I should note we are working hard to get that portal up and running, and my guess we will have it open once the rule is final, but let's assume this timeline stays in place. And then you'll be filing your tax return sometime next year. And then there'll be a payment made after that return is processed. Next slide, please. So last thing I want to call your attention to, because I know many of you are thinking about wearing my local government hat about how to grade and blend funds, right? So the proposed guidance includes a special rule that enables entities to combine grants and forgivable loans with tax credits. So I'll just jump to an example here. A school district gets a tax exempt grant in the amount of $300,000 to purchase an electric school bus, let's say. Clean commercial vehicles under IRA are eligible for a tax credit. In this case, it'll be up to $40,000. The school district purchases the bus for $400,000 using the grant and $100,000 of the school district's unrestricted funds. This means that the school district's basis in the electric bus is $400,000, and the school district's section 45W credit is $40,000. Since the amount of the restricted tax exempt grant plus the amount of the section 45W credit, $340,000, is less than the cost of the bus, the school district's 45W credit is not reduced. So understand that is complex, but that's an example where I think pulling these pieces together will hopefully generate more value for you. So there's a lot more to say. I know this is complex. As I said at the beginning, this is not tax guidance. This is intended to be illustrative. We are also at a point where we have put out preliminary guidance, and you can see the links here. Please take a closer look. There's also a lot of information about many other parts of the IRA tax provisions under irs.gov. Clean energy, elective pay is there. Cleanenergy.gov has a link to direct pay. We are doing webinars and education opportunities all summer. So please feel free to tune in to more conversations. And just as a reminder, the public comment period is until August 14th. And please, if you have comments, submit them in writing. And even more importantly, hopefully think hard about how to use this, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Laurel, thank you so much. You've got some very impressed colleagues from local government in the chat. As you can see, we've got lots and lots of questions, which we also love to see. So we're going to open the chat or open the Zoom now for questions. And the first question is from Mayor Roach of White Plains. Do you want to come off mute and ask your question, Mayor?
Sure. Thank you. And this question's for John. And I know my staff was really happy when I brought this particular item to them, because they don't have to apply for a grant. I just said, it's like I put solar panels on my roof. I just fill out the form, I submit it, and then I get paid. And that's what we're looking at. But are there other strategies that the administration is considering to build local capacity to make it easier for cities to take advantage of these opportunities? Because I know some of my colleagues, it gets a little overwhelming. And so I commented the other day that it's like we went from famine to feast, but we don't know how to get to the table.
Yes, Mayor, thanks for the question. And I just want to underscore one thing that was implicit in Laurel's presentation. By stacking these credits, for example, in the context that you said, we have a clean and healthy schools campaign in the city. You want to put rooftop solar on all the schools in the city. You can get as much as 50 or 60%, depending on if you're in a low income neighborhood, if you're paying prevailing wage, if you're using domestic content. For cities under this program, domestic content's a little bit tricky, but we'll get some more information out to you. In general, that's a requirement that kicks in over a couple of years. But that means that 60% of the total cost of the project, you get a check back from the federal government. It means you also have to finance it up front. And so we're working on two things in direct answer to your question. One is to provide more technical assistance and capacity, working with the philanthropic community to ensure that people kind of understand what is relatively new and a relatively complicated program. Bloomberg Philanthropies and Mike have been at the forefront of this, trying to provide staff and local capacity to make sure they're taking advantage of these things. And we're working with a number of other philanthropies to do the same thing. And then I think we're trying to orient our staffing across the federal family to have some deep understanding of how these provisions work. So whether you're talking to someone from the Department of Energy or from the White House or from USDA, they know enough about this that they can get you to the right place to work through how these provisions might apply to specific projects. Like I mentioned, obviously the energy generation, but also really on the transportation side, there's enormous capacity here. We've got the EPA school bus grant program, but this really ups the ante in terms of being able to electrify your municipal vehicles as school buses at all, garbage trucks, whatever you're investing in to move to low emission vehicles. This has a really substantial advantage.
We just ordered a garbage truck, so thank you.
Look at that on the webinar. So next question from Carly Foster. Do you want to come off mute?
Sure. Hi, and this question is around 48C, which has the concept paper due at the end of the month. I had understood that we would potentially receive an allocation by March of 2024, and then it would have to be certified within 2 years, which to me meant all the permits are received and you're able to get certification within 2 years. And then within 2 years after that, everything has to be constructed and in service. So that puts us out to early 2028 as the deadline for round one to be in service. Could you please let me know whether that's right, in terms of those timelines, and then also if there's any information you can provide about round two and when that might be expected and any timelines. Thank you.
No problem. So I would have to get back to you on the 48C specific question. I apologize. I thought we were talking about a different credit. But John, I don't know if you know the answer to that question, but I'm happy to circle back.
We'll double check the math, but that is essentially right. There are 2 allocated credits in the IRA, 48C for industrial facilities and 48 little e, which is a low income, basically solar battery storage credit that's allocated that Treasury is working with the Department of Energy on to get you apply, you get that allocation. It's a valuable commodity, as you will, as it were. But the timelines are basically what you said, Carly, in terms of getting those into service. 40% of the 48C allocation is going to coal communities under the statute. So largely for repurposing of existing infrastructure, but that still leaves a substantial amount of money, and direct pay does apply to that credit. So if there's a facility that's going out of service or one in which you want to repurpose to a form of clean energy manufacturing, it might be quite a valuable credit.
Great. Let's go next to Mayor Mason of Racine, Wisconsin.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. So the question is basically, when can we start using this in the real world? Since the IRA passed, we've been very excitingly aggregating ARPA funds and other things to build the city's first fairly qualified health clinic and a community center to go along with it. It's a $65 million project. But just to put it in context, as we've been waiting for the IRA rules to go into effect, construction inflation has exceeded whatever savings we might see from the IRA rebates. And so as everything gets more expensive, as money gets more expensive, as construction costs get more expensive, I'm really excited to launch. And I'm just wondering with the information today, is this enough to start and get pre-clearance? Or do we wait until the rules are finalized later in the year?
Laurel, do you want to go? The registration is not pre-clearance, and maybe Laurel will go after that. It's a element of to ensure that only eligible entities are have the credit available to them. But basically, the credit is available now. The direct pay is available now. As Laurel said, if you could build these projects, get them into service, you're on a filing timeline where you could receive payments as early as next spring. There will be additional guidance, but taxpayers can rely on the guidance that's been put out to date. And so the contours of the direct pay program have already been issued by IRS and Treasury, and you can rely on those. So if you can get those projects built, you could be applying for those funds.
Just to add a little bit, if I could, elected pay is effective for taxable years beginning after December 31st, 2022. So it's exactly right. And so if you're working on this project and putting it in service this year and do the pre-registration and the filing, you should be able, as John said, to claim that and receive that later next year.
Great. That's the best news I've had all day. Thank you very much.
Another win. Tobin Freed of Durham.
Hi, thank you so much for this information and for all the work you're doing to try to make this work for local governments and other nonprofits. Really appreciate it. I had heard on a recent different webinar that partnerships were not allowed, and that even if all the partners are eligible entities, it somehow negates the ability to take advantage of these direct pay. And my question about that is, well, is that true? It's a pretty reputable source. Does that mean if two eligible partners, like the city of Durham and Durham County, got together to buy an electric bus, we couldn't take the credit because we put our money together? Or does that mean if the city of Durham and Durham County decided to do group purchasing where together we're buying two buses, except Durham County's paying for one and the city's paying for another, but we're getting a better price because we're buying two, for example, could we then take the credits? I guess I'm just a little confused on how the partnership messes this up and what partnership really means.
Well, I think if you have two eligible entities, I don't think there's an issue. We're taking comment on what happens when you have a private sector entity that's doing a partnership with a nonprofit. And there'll be further guidance issued by Treasury on that in that context. But if you could imagine that in tax equity, this happens, that a nonprofit entity and a for-profit entity partner to build a community solar project. How do you allocate? Can the nonprofit entity take direct pay while the other party is claiming the credit on the taxable side? And so that's still a question that we need to have further guidance on. But I think I will go back and check, but I think in the case you described where you have two eligible entities for direct pay, I don't think there should be an impediment to partnering in that sense.
Thank you.
That's my understanding.
Oh, did I get that right?
Yep. I was just putting that in the
I am a lawyer, but I try to pretend that I don't know anything about law.
So we have
But
time.
we'll get that around. We'll clarify that for you, Tom.
We have time for one more question, and then we're going to collect all the questions that have been coming in on the chat and get them to the administration and get the answers, many answers as we can out to you. But also the questions are super helpful for the administration to understand what's on the minds of local governments. And so keep them coming if you have any additional ones, because we will make sure that our administration team knows what they are, and we'll get as many answers as we can. So last question from our partner, or question in Rebecca Owen in Lebanon.
Yes, I guess the timing is a little challenging with tax credits, because if we want to stack them with other funding and put them into our budget to reduce the total request of a grant, for example, there's some uncertainty in that you'll actually get them, because from what I've learned, it's not that simple of a process to have a compliant project. So for some cases at least, but what I'm getting at is we were just in touch with our state Department of Environmental Services, and they didn't want us to factor in tax credits with a EPA clean diesel grant. And it seemed like a lost opportunity, but the risk is that we would come in under budget, so to speak, if we anticipated a tax credit and didn't get it. I don't know what their concern is, but we're being discouraged from integrating the tax credit. So I'd like to see more examples like that school bus one out there, and more encouragement with state agencies to integrate them.
That's a good catch. We'll try to both provide more clarity on example and work with states also who are
Thank you.
going to be your partners.
Thank you.
Anything else, John, Laurel?
Thank you.
Yeah, look forward to partnering.
You're really helpful. Look forward to partnering. Yeah.
Thank you both. We'll be getting you the rest of the questions. Now I'm going to be turning to Alex Dane, who's the Senior Manager for Clean Energy Innovation and Partnerships to the U.S. Energy Program at the World Resources Institute. Alex is going to facilitate our conversation with our mayors, who are going to share how they're using these direct pay tax provisions to finance climate solutions in their cities. Alex?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. And just great to see the entire spectrum of folks, including mayors, chief resilience officers, directors of economic development, chief sustainability officers, innovation officers, planners, engineers, and energy managers. This is a new rung on the ladder to achieve local equitable decarbonization. So really excited to explore this. And thank you in advance to Mayor Lily Mei and Mayor Erin Mendenhall from Fremont, California, and from Salt Lake City, respectively. And I had a chance to read your bios, dive into your sustainability plans over the past few days, and I'm just absolutely impressed by the entire experience that you've had to get where you are and the leadership that you've demonstrated to this point. And that, you know, this is a new tool to help achieve your goals and your city's goals. And I wanted to start off the conversation with just, you know, what is the experience of the city as far as your climate action plan, your energy plan? And if you could just give an update for us and maybe share some of the sort of recent successes or milestones that you've hit along the way, then we'll jump a little bit deeper into what IRA means to you. So maybe I'll start with Mayor Mendenhall. You're first on my screen.
Hi, thanks for having me here today. And air quality is my favorite subject as a policy nerd here. So I'm really excited to talk to you about this. But in case you didn't know this, Salt Lake City, while it's gorgeous and we're about 30 minutes from sitting on a ski lift, we sit in a bowl-shaped valley. And sometimes this bowl-shaped valley helps us trap both particle pollution and ozone. And at times we experience the worst pollution in the nation. So it makes our work to battle climate change very personal for Salt Lakers. And so Salt Lake City's been implementing strategies based on our Climate Positive 2040 plan. And there's 4 big areas that I'll tell you about today. First is supporting and pursuing renewable energy. Second would be electric vehicles. Third, public transportation and active transportation expansion. And then 4th is prioritizing our energy efficiency. So one of our biggest initiatives around renewable energy, we call it the Community Renewable Energy Program. You should check it out because it's the first of its kind in the nation. And it creates a default net 100% renewable electricity program for all Salt Lake City ratepayers. And in a state like Utah, where we are a blue dot in a very red state, community choice aggregation is not an option for us according to our state laws. So this is our invention of a workaround that if you're in a community similar to ours, then you should check this out. We've been working not alone, but with our public utility, which is Rocky Mountain Power here, and 17 other communities all along the state of Utah to create this program. And we are expecting to send it to our regulators in the next couple of months, hopefully for approval of our rate structure. We're also undertaking 2 electrified transportation studies right now. One is looking at how do we maximize our internal fleet electrification. We have about 4,000 city employees and thousands of vehicles that are owned by the city. And the other side of our study is looking at our community-facing EV infrastructure. Both of them support our goals in our climate plan to electrify as much of our fleet as possible and to support the transition out there in our community. This year, we enacted a brand new EV ready ordinance that calls for all new multifamily construction in the city to include at least conduit for future EV level 2 installations in at least 20% of installed parking stalls. And that requirement is on top of our current requirement for at least 1 EV charger installed per 25 spaces created. On the public transportation side, we're working with our transit authority, who is UTA, and we've been working over the last 2 budgets to make about 22,000 transit passes free for all of our public school children, staff, and now we've added 1 parent or guardian for each student. And since 2019, we've also been investing a little segment of our ongoing sales tax to buy up bus service from UTA so that we can get more Salt Lake City specific routes to serve our neighborhoods that were really underserved by transit. You might be in a similar situation. We're a city that doubles our workday population with regional commuters coming in to go to school and go to work. And the UTA system was primarily focused on serving those regional commuters. This is the way we're making it work better for us. We also have a complete streets ordinance. That means anytime we do construction, major construction on our streets, we must evaluate to build them safer for bikers and pedestrians. And we've been including better bus stop shelters while we're doing that work. I'm a biker and my family loves to bike. These kind of improvements are like, they're slow going, but we have been at it for so many years that we have developed a really bike friendly city. And I think the complete streets ordinance is a big part of that. This year, our city council just approved a new air quality incentives program that I'll give Denver a shout out. We saw what Denver did there last year. And basically this would include e-bike rebates for households. A household could buy different air quality tools for indoors, like better HVAC filters or air purifiers. And also our residents could get rebates for electric landscaping equipment to help our community reduce those at ground level emissions that we're making. Internally, we updated our comprehensive sustainability policy so that all new construction or renovation of any municipal building over a certain size has to be designed to be all electric and combustion free. And finally, with our Salt Lake City Council approval, we will be the recipient of an EPA climate pollution reduction grant. And that means we'll be facilitating with our community conversations over the next several years in developing a priority climate action plan and also a comprehensive climate action plan for our entire metro area. So it's a little sampling of what we're doing, but sustainability is baked into sort of the hub of city government here in our city. And it's pretty exciting, the big things that are happening. But this funding and financing is beyond anything I could have dreamed when I was an air quality activist 10 years ago. Really excited to be here.
Thank you for having us. This is, fantastic work, Mayor Mendenhall. That's great. And let's pull on that thread. And Mayor Mei, I promise we will give you equal amount of time. But I just let's pull on that thread since you painted the picture of what's happening in Salt Lake. As far as IRA funding goes and eligible tax credits, are there like projects that you are already seeing that you could line up that dovetail into your city goals and strategies? I know we mentioned the EV ordinance, and maybe there's some fodder for thought there, but combining the conversation we just had and where your city's headed, maybe pull on one and illuminate where you see there to be an opportunity with IRA. Let's see, Mayor Mendenhall, that was for you, perhaps.
Lily's looking.
I think it's for you.
Yes. Okay.
All right. It's
Sorry, Mayor Mendenhall, I was just clarifying from the sort of the
Oh.
progress that you've made, where do you see IRA dovetailing into and supporting, bolstering those strategies and initiatives? And then we'll
Oh,
go
I
to
apologize.
Mayor.
I thought that
Sure.
question was for Mayor May.
I thought you were frozen for a second and I was out there in the wilderness, but here we are, we're good. Okay.
Oh, we're excited about the program. I think we'll be looking at any and all projects, in particular installing solar PV on the rooftop of some of our major recreation centers where we've got a lot of square footage on those roofs. Also installing those EV stations I talked about, and really with a priority for geographically equitable distribution of that EV access, and in purchasing all electric vehicles, particularly those heavy duty options that are just coming out to market that we are running in the city 6 to 7 days a week. It would make a pretty huge impact on our PM and ozone production. So those are a few of our ideas.
That's great. That's great. Sorry for the confusion there. Now we will move to Mayor May. Walk us through a similar journey and paint the picture of, sort of from climate action plan and sort of recent milestone successes you've had. And then the, next step question is, how do you see IRA dovetailing and supporting those efforts?
Sure. So good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the time zones. I wanted to say welcome to the city of Fremont. And I'm delighted to be able to share a little bit about our city's efforts on climate action plan. It was first adopted in 2012, and our goal was originally to have a 25% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from the 2005 levels by 2020, and we were able to achieve that by 2018. So we achieved it ahead of schedule, but we've been active in joining other cities, and I have the pleasure that Fremont does have the opportunity to be part of a CCA. So we joined in the formation of East Bay Community Energy, and it's a community-based electricity provider that provides greener electricity mix, and we've also gone with 100% renewable, and collaborating with other jurisdictions on regional renewable energy projects to install solar carports at city facilities. I jokingly tell people sometimes that in our city of Fremont, we have some of the most EVs per zip code and some of the greatest infrastructure. And I think that's important because not only are the cars supercharged, so are the people. And so undertaking one of the things that when I first came in also is a $9 million energy efficiency upgrade for our city facilities, including replacing all of our 16,000 streetlights with LEDs. Not the city got brighter, not just the people, but literally that helps us in terms of some of the efforts that we've had in terms of multi-mobility and also just for safety and equity and making sure that we have that access for all of our community members. And we finance the project using utility savings to pay off bonds. And then I definitely echo some of the concerns that we're talking about with natural climate impact acts that we see right now, whether it's the earthquakes that we have sometimes out here in California or the apocalyptic orange skies that we faced. And so we believe in utilizing the technology that we make and manufacture. We also have been noted as being one of the 4th greenest cities in the United States. And we have I think probably some of the most hardware clean tech manufacturing of any city in the United States, and the most manufacturing jobs in California. And so that helps us. We utilize our own technology. So we've demonstrated that with our fire stations, and out of our fire stations, 4 of our city fire stations have installed solar battery microgrids, and they provide low-cost emission-free power while increasing our resiliency by allowing our stations, in a case of a natural disaster or rolling blackouts, to island and to be able to use that energy, all while helping to pilot local firms. And we've replicated this not just in our city, but throughout the region. And I'm excited to see that's expanding right now to over 30 new locations. And pioneering also in terms of, we talked about electric vehicles. We have a small manufacturer in Fremont, which we've utilized and partnered with in the past. And we had transformed some of the used former Teslas into pilot those with our electric vehicles. And so that helps us in terms of demonstrating and utilizing some of the technology and to understand, what the cost is for maintenance and the ongoing infrastructure. And I'll be talking about that as we talk about the next phase. We've also adopted an updated land use plan, general plan for strategic urban development, which is very important for us. We have encouraged people to utilize multi-mobility. One of those is our transit. And we, as such, in California, we have a challenge sometimes with providing housing, but because we've been strategic and looking at that when it came to transit-oriented development, we were able to address walkable schools, a brand new bike ped bridge close to manufacturing. We even looked at things during the pandemic, like first mile and last mile, and utilizing some of our autonomous vehicles to demonstrate that. And because of the pandemic, while it was originally taking our workers to and from the local train station to our office, we pivoted during that time period to use those same technology to pilot, also delivering food to seniors in that situation, to be able to continue the pilot, but not fail to demonstrate the ability to use that. So clean tech is definitely a sizable and growing part of Fremont's industrial base. So investments like the IRA will also enhance our economic development and workforce goals. I would say some of the best product that we make in terms of, besides the project, is the people. And such, again, we're really honored to be recognized by the League of California Cities and Beacon Vanguard as a Platinum Award for the Institute of Local Governments because of the accomplishments that we've made as big cities. And right now, when it comes to the next steps, we're releasing the draft update of our next Climate Action 2.0 for public comment, with a new goal of a 55% reduction from 2005 by 2030, and on the way to achieving carbon neutrality by 2045. The update also really includes more of the emphasis on resiliency, equitable achievements, adapting to climate change faster than our plan originally in 2012. But that wouldn't happen without the engagement of our community. And so that means everyone from our youth to our transit stations and to our companies that are here. We have several companies that are net zero. And in fact, even right around the corner from where I'm sitting right now, one of our new bank facilities is going to be, their headquarters is going to have lead in terms of the standings of the facility. And I jokingly sometimes tell people, how green is the city of Fremont? Even our nuns are green. So we have Dominican Sisters, which has used rainwater catching and solar over their roofs. We use that over our carports. And as a city, I saw the question come up earlier about, have we adopted these codes? I will let you know that California has adopted some of these codes, but our city led with some of that. When we built our transit-oriented development, I could see the trend going that direction. So that was a requirement for us. Just to let some people know, we do ask people that when it comes to multi-tenant housing, to look at facilities, especially commercial, and even our businesses, to try to incorporate as much as possible in terms of addressing the climate, the EV ready and solar ready opportunities for people to adopt those.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And it's interesting to see what the city of Fremont already was able to deploy as far as the clean energy transition goes, even before and in advance of the IRA. As far as clean energy, a lot of the work deployment, that resilience focused work was done in a sort of maybe economic perspective that was even less advantageous to where it will be in subsequent years. But it's a good lighthouse for other cities to see, what measures can be taken by leaders like the city of Fremont.
That's fantastic. I was just going to say, our IRA project is that we are going to continue our electrification of our fleet, and our goal is to have all of that utilized in terms of different EV types. And we're looking at in the near term of acquiring Ford F-150, Lightning trucks, also SUVs and sedans and crossovers for utilization within our fleet. That is our goal, is to electrify our entire fleet. So
that's great. Throw one in for me. I would love the F-150. That would be great. We're going to wrap in about 2 minutes here, but I really wanted that you hit on this, Mayor Mei, of this is a community-wide, there's community-wide impact that comes with IRA, where eligible entities can also enjoy the benefits, not just municipal operations. And I wanted to turn it back to Mayor Mendenhall. How does Salt Lake City and your sort of administration leadership want to communicate across community, sort of newly eligible community stakeholders to become aware and be able to capitalize on this new opportunity?
You know, we had a coincidental local conversation, that's a mild way for me to put it, where our state decided back in 2018 that it wanted to create an inland port here. We are the crossroads of the West with I-15 and I-80 right here in the heart of Salt Lake City. We have a brand new international airport. I'm sorry, everybody, but we have the best airport in the country. If you haven't flown through the new SLC, you should just make a trip just to do that and come check out our airport. That's like 11 minutes from the downtown core. A lot of capacity for cargo because of that growth in the conversation with the state, but it really pissed off the locals. Salt Lakers didn't want an inland port here, and the way that the state was going about it, stripping away our tax money, but still requiring municipal services, has tipped off a broader conversation. And really, we've resolved in many ways some of those, I'll call them initial challenges that the state posed. But what it's meant is that the community, the Port Authority, meaning the state really, and the city have to work together to create a baseline of environmental impacts, traffic impacts, and community-based impacts, and then invest part of that tax increment, which could be our matching money for some of these funds potentially, and identify projects that we'll be tracking the data on because of the baseline studies we've done. So that's been a really unique opportunity. I wish it wouldn't have happened, but I do think we're set up for better success in the future because of the work that it's compelling. But Salt Lake City has been, as I said, leading out on sustainability, at least for the state in terms of a municipal approach for over a decade. And it's almost like we had all these arrows in our quiver. And now that there's this funding and these tax opportunities available, we're like, oh my gosh, now we know what we can do. Now we can pull these arrows out and fling them. So we're pretty, I don't know if you can tell, I'm excited. We're very excited here in Salt Lake.
That is wonderful. I love that metaphor. I think we'll probably end it there. I want to thank Mayor Mendenhall. I like the Robin Hood analogy as we go forth. Thank you so much. And just, a note of the municipal and community-wide impact. Thank you for sharing your perspectives on those. And thank you for giving your perspectives today. With that, I'm going to throw it over to Jamie.
And I'm going to take it away to hand it back to Mayor Mendenhall to introduce our next speaker. But I love the analogy for the arrows in the quiver too. The preparation in advance has made us able to act on this moment. So Mayor Mendenhall to introduce the next guest.
Thank you. In addition to serving as the mayor of Salt Lake City, I also am the chair of the conference's Alliance for a Sustainable Future, which is a joint effort with the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, or what we call C2ES. And the purpose of the alliance is to bring together the public and private sectors to identify what are these innovative best practices in climate change in such a rapidly changing environment as we're in. Last year, the alliance, with the help of AECOM, published a report of the city climate best practices and the resources that are now in the infrastructure law that could be used to implement those best practices, along with an appendix, which didn't exist before, that outlines every agency's environmental and climate initiatives that were included in the law. It's an incredible resource, and it really helps you crack the code of what is the infrastructure law and the many facets of money that exist. So building off of this work, today we're excited to announce that the Alliance, in a collaboration again with AECOM, is announcing the release of a new report titled Cities Advancing Climate Action, Unlocking the Potential of the Inflation Reduction Act. The report, which was officially released last week, showcases how local governments could use these new direct pay tax credits that we were just briefed on to help us fund infrastructure projects that include a climate mitigation or resiliency component in our communities. So highlighting the importance of this historic new financial tool, the report outlines which of the new tax credits will be most useful to cities, as well as the opportunities available to increase the value of those credits there locally where you're at. Additionally, this publication features 3 case studies based on real-world municipal projects, showcasing how these new tax credits can help cities save millions when investing in clean energy projects like electric vehicle fleets, charging stations, and microgrids. So to give us an overview of this new report, we are joined by Bill Abel. Thanks for being here, Bill. He's the Vice President of Energy at AECOM, and he previously served as the Budget Director and Environmental Commissioner for the City of Chicago. I want to thank Bill and the entire team for AECOM's support for this new report and for the Alliance. Bill, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk with everybody. Let's go to the first slide, please. As the mayor pointed out, AECOM's had the honor to work with the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Center for Climate and Energy Solutions over the last several years to document case studies of mayors working with businesses and their communities and other stakeholders to build a more resilient and sustainable future. The last 2 reports, including the one that's released today or was released last week, specifically focuses on the role of the federal government with unprecedented funding for infrastructure and now for the climate emergency with the Inflation Reduction Act. The report that was released last week is very specific around direct pay as an opportunity that's a real game changer because it hasn't been available before for local governments and not-for-profit entities. I think one of the other exciting things about direct pay, as was pointed out earlier, is the ability to match or add other sources of money, like grants from utilities at the federal or state level together to make those tax credits go further. Let's go to the next slide. One of the things that we've been most excited about in our work with the Conference of Mayors and C2ES is the approach to the reports. They're all based on case studies. They're based on real world examples of mayors rolling up their sleeves in their communities to get the job done. We think that that's the best way that communities can learn from each other and accelerate adoption. So what does the report cover? A lot of the things that were talked about earlier, just what a real change that direct pay provisions are. What are the direct pay provisions that seem to be most promising based on some municipal examples? And then we go into a financial analysis of what the tax credits would mean for those projects. Each project is based on a real world example of issues that cities are trying to grapple with. So let's go to the next one, please. There are 3 case studies, and again, they're based on some of the tax credits that seem to be most applicable to cities based on the type of work that they're doing to advance climate action and improve resilience. 2 of them focus on the use of renewable energy and microgrids to enhance critical infrastructure and to support economic development activities. The 3rd project example is specifically focused on an issue that mayors are interested in around the country and that Mayor Mendenhall raised, and that's around electrification of their fleets and communities. In the first case study, we looked at an innovative city that developed a district energy system, one of the most successful district energy systems in the United States, focused on using sewer heat recovery to provide heating and cooling to our economic development center. That plan initially included a microgrid, a solar and battery storage microgrid that had to be cut out of the plan because at the time, it just didn't meet the economic requirements. What we do in the case study is apply the specific benefits of the direct pay provisions and note a really dramatic reduction in the overall cost of the project, both the initial capital cost as well as the long-term interest rates that have to be paid because of the smaller capital financing. The second one, which we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail, is a really exciting project focused on critical infrastructure, particularly around sewer treatment plants. Those plants are huge energy users, but they have the potential to be huge net zero energy producers. We'll talk in a minute about a plan for a microgrid powered by solar, storage, and biogas recovery, and the real difference that the Inflation Reduction Act makes for it. The final is a look at one community's plans to accelerate fleet decarbonization with over 100 vehicles, as well as the appropriate charging infrastructure. What did we find from that? A significant reduction of to get to a point where the project pays back, and significant benefits in it from 6 years down to 4. So it really makes a difference, not just for the vehicle conversion, but for the infrastructure in place. Let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about case study number 2. You know, this is a really interesting project example. Cities around the country have to deal with critical facilities and don't really have the option of closing those facilities down. They have to work 24/7, 365 days a year. In this instance, the city wanted to make a commitment to climate reduction, improve overall community resilience, and at the same time upgrade their infrastructure. They began planning a microgrid. The microgrid was at the sewer treatment facility and was designed to collect power from gas, biogas that otherwise would have to be flared, creating an environmental impact in the community. At the same time, taking advantage of state grants and incentives, they were able to add battery storage as well as solar power. What did they find in dealing with that critical infrastructure? The same thing that cities find around the US, and that's deferred maintenance on must-run pieces of equipment. Undermine not just the ability to achieve the microgrid, but even if you didn't do the microgrid, would be absolutely required to be done just to keep the plant operational. The price tag of just those improvements was about $70 million. By making it a part of an energy project, and an energy project that improves resilience, and it increases environmental performance in the community, that provides long-term operational benefits. They were able to get the total cost of the project down to about $48 million. How did they do that? In part through the direct pay provisions, because upgrades to their biogas system, to their general electrical infrastructure that were essential to the microgrid project could be included within that project and become eligible for the direct pay provisions. That enhanced performance of the system generates savings in terms of operations of the microgrid, as many of the mayors pointed out. It makes sense to operate these systems and operate modern systems well. The lower capital costs reduce overall interest rates, and state level rebates and assistance help make the difference. Again, these are investments that the city would have to make ultimately anyway. They would have to make with ratepayer dollars. But with the help of the federal government, with the help of the IRA, those could be shared with the federal government. So let's go to the next slide, just to give you a couple of suggestions on how to start planning. And again, as was pointed out earlier, we're not tax advisors, nor was anybody else, but there's huge opportunity here. The first opportunity when you're planning, and this is something that cities are really great at, and that is focusing on project locations. As was pointed out, there are real incentives for doing things like locating facilities in communities that have been burdened by environmental contamination in lower income areas. There are huge benefits for things like apprenticeship programs that help build jobs and opportunity in the community. But that has to be done, that takes time to do. You need to work with your procurement people, you need to work with your planning agencies to choose wisely and structure projects that have the best opportunity and the best chance of being funded. I think the other thing to really think about, and it was mentioned earlier, is to understand the relationship of different sources of funding and support for your projects, how they can be combined together and how they have to be kept separate. Grants could be layered on top to make the credits go further. On the other hand, if you're taking advantage of tax-exempt financing, there may be some reductions in your credits. And all that, what does all that mean? You need to work closely with your tax counsel, with your professional staffs, and track what's going on with the IRS. But we're excited about it. We hope that the case studies provide some very specific, actionable examples that help mayors continue to do the hard work of building a more resilient future. Thanks.
Bill, thanks so much. And as always, the examples are the best tool for cities to implement well. So we have gone slightly over time. Want to give you a chance to fill out our poll to get your feedback about the session. And in the meantime, I'm going to just remind you that we are going to send you all of the content and materials and answer as many questions as we can from the administration that were in the chat poll. A few announcements as well. This Thursday, June 20th, we are going to be talking about the tech and innovate. It's going to be a tech and innovation session highlighting winning applications and best practices for strengthening mobility and revolutionizing transportation grants program. July 25th, a session that I'm particularly excited about, Reconnecting Communities, which is a funding opportunity. We're going to be talking about strategies for using this funding opportunity to drive economic mobility in communities that were divided in the past by infrastructure. And then on Tuesday, August 8th, please join us to discuss the best strategies for working with your state's leadership to enhance your city's water quality infrastructure. So thank you again to all of our LIH partners. Thank you to those who attended, and we will see you next time.